we haven't had a truly vegan civilization, like documented. Like this is a new thing, because each culture, for example, we might have, the blue zones, for example, there are people who prop that up as like, it's plant-based. These are plant-based, we go, no, it might be 10% animal products in this particular culture, but don't ignore that it's there. Don't ignore that it's there. It's okay. This doesn't mean that the person has to be a carnivore, but just acknowledge like, hey, maybe some omega-3s from this source is ideal, because today we can use our modern technology to affirm what our ancestors already knew. Like, for example, another study that I talked about in the cognitive performance section in Eat Smarter was one of my really good friends, Dr. Daniel Amen. He actually wrote the cover quote for my book. He's doing SPECT scans. He's doing brain imaging, looking at the brain to see how nutrition affects the brain. All right. So if somebody knows, he knows. But anyway, so doing fMRIs and actually looking at the brain, researchers have uncovered that people who have the lowest intake of DHA in particular have the highest rate of brain shrinkage. That is terrible. That's terrible. It's something that doesn't have to happen. And the implementation of DHA and EPA specifically that are primarily going to be coming from animal foods helps to improve reaction time, just overall cognitive ability, memory. The list goes on and on and on. Now, I put that parameter mostly animal foods because your body can make some out of precursors. So ALA, which is a plant version of omega-3s, which I spent time in my clinical practice. People were coming in when I had tunnel vision with a vegan protocol. And I was telling people, you got to get your flaxseed oil, hemp seeds, your chia seeds, all these, get your omega-3s. They're so important. I can see the data on how important omega-3s are, but I'm ignoring that this is DHA and EPA that the studies are saying. So your body can take ALA and convert it into some DHA and EPA, but depending on your microbiome, your genetics, you could lose upwards of 75, 85, 90% in this conversion process. And so for you to get the amount of DHA that you need to protect your brain from literally degradation, because DHA and EPA are needed for essentially signal transduction, like your cells being able to talk to each other. There's structural fats. They're not used as energy in the same way that other dietary fats are used. They're used to literally make the structure of your brain. This is not a joke. It's so important. And so deficiency in these things is not okay. And so what are the best sources? And talking with, again, folks like Daniel Amen, neuroscientists out of NYU, Lisa Mosconi, another friend, she told me that it's not the fish, it's fish eggs that are the most dense source of DHA and EPA that you're going to find in nature. So salmon roe, caviar, things that just seemed very fancy to me. I was just like, oh, this is why it's so prized by our ancestors for thousands of years. They figured this out. Also, eggs kept coming up in that category of really viable source, not just of omega-3s, but also of phospholipids. Because if we're talking about the the fats that actually make up the structure of the human brain, the structural fats, sphingolipids, phospholipids, and cholesterol. These are the fats that actually make up your brain. And this is not a joke. So finding viable sources. Also, obviously fish, fatty fish. The Journal of Neurology found that just one seafood meal per week, folks who are eating just 1 to 2 seafood meals per week did in fact perform significantly better on cognitive skills tests than people who ate less than that. All right. We know that it's got the good stuff there. Grass-fed beef. Also, you can get some omega-3s, some viable omega-3s there. But again, if somebody's doing a vegan or vegetarian protocol, I've been working my ass off the last few years hey, we've got to get you on the algae oil at least. All right. So we know, but again, we get into this conversation where we know that the omega-3 DHA is there, but we haven't run clinical trials to see the assimilation. Does it perform as well as a fish oil supplement does? And we've got all this data on. So, but then fish oil, we got this controversy with fish oil. Like every single thing is going to have somebody poking holes in it, and that's good. But we do not want to get into a situation where we're dogmatic and where we think we've got it all figured out and our way is the only way.
Well, given the importance of, you mentioned DHA, EPA, and these other components of our brain, And you mentioned a number of foods there we can have that are high in these nutrients. Talk about the controversy in fish oil. And then do you get all the important fats and nutrients for your brain through food, or do you feel like you need to supplement to get all of that?
I'm a big proponent of food first. This is, again, not to say that my way is the only way, because within the food first paradigm, there are some issues because our food is not the same as our ancestors. People have been talking for many years about the degradation of the soil, reduction of nutrients coming through in our food, and comparative studies that might come out, like a carrot today versus a carrot 20 years ago. And then the expert might be like, well, just eat 2 carrots then, and just like at some point, 3 carrots might be too much. It reminds me of Ace Ventura. I don't know if you remember, he kept getting hit by those darts, and one dart he kept running, another dart, and he's like, 3 darts is too much. At some point, it's going to be too much, and we need to go to food-based supplements, right? Food-based concentrates of supplements. Essentially, that's what fish oil is, really. And if it's done in an efficacious way, it is also done in a way that is protective of the oil, right? If the company is doing it the right way. Now, I think that probably the biggest controversy around it is probably sustainability, and rightfully so. Like, there's definitely some concerns here. But it's not because we don't have an abundance or had an abundance. It's because it's not even the overfishing paradigm. It's what we're doing to the environment. And we've lost like 70% of the animal species on planet Earth in like the last, 50 to 100 years. Like it's some crazy statistic like that. It's nuts. Like, we just keep endangered species and then like extinction. Like, we're just doing this shit every day. And without bounds, like, nobody's thinking about this. Like, they're too busy, watching Netflix in the McDonald's drive-thru. All right. I don't know if anybody's ever did that, but that's just what popped out of my consciousness, because I know it's happening. And so people aren't really thinking about this stuff. And there are folks in advocacy for all these things. But I think part of the problem is these people think that their thing is the only thing. And so they get tunnel vision with what's happening here. The only reason we can do something like that, pursue so much destruction, is that we're destroying ourselves. We're not healthy. People that are trying to protect the environment negate the fact that other humans are part of the environment. We're environment too. And if we're unwell, if we're mentally unwell, physically unwell, it's very difficult to make healthful decisions or to give a shit about some rare fish group that is on the endangered species list. It's very difficult to care about, cuttlefish if you're not healthy. Like, you're trying to just like survive. Because humans as well, we have the capacity to help to reverse so much of this. Like, we could do it so quickly. If you saw what happened in LA when everything shut down, and like this, I could see mountains behind mountains off in the distance. Just like, I didn't know that was there, because the skies just cleared up, right? Wild animals, true story, start coming into our neighborhood, and life finds a way when it has the opportunity and access. And this is what's so exciting about regenerative farming. Like, truly, I highly encourage everybody to check out the film Sacred Cow if you haven't seen it, and to see like this particular. He's not even a farmer, but he's more of a scientist, and he took on this challenge of like, how quickly can, using some of these strategies, he essentially turned like a desert into viable farmland by utilizing regenerative farming practices and cows and circulation in a certain way, and turn what seemed to be this thing that would take hundreds of years to create viable land to grow food on in like a couple of years. It is crazy. And so, even with that argument, also there's concerns with, toxicity, which again, that's viable, very viable. So for me, I have this bias where I'm looking for, I think that I'm more so doing the thing that science, conventional medicine says that they're doing. We're looking for benefits outweighing the potential downside, right? I'm really doing that, but I'm doing it from a place of like, let's get significant benefit. And if there's a downside, actually small downside, not like they're very close to each other. It's just like, oh, this is just a little bit better, you know? So with that being said, DHA and EPA are so freaking important that for me, we're talking about brain shrinkage. We're talking about cognitive performance. We're talking about what makes you human, your brain. Your brain is what makes you human, truly. And so with that, and if we have a small level of toxicity, so be it. Let's create resilience. Let's create healthy cellular communities so that we can process toxicants in a healthful manner, because that's what our bodies do. Now, we have never been exposed to this level of toxicity, let's be clear. But this is what we have to do. We have to rise to the occasion. We have to stack conditions in our favor, because we don't want to be so pristine and healthy in our ways about things that if you get like a gram of gluten in your, in your potato somehow, and then you have a full on breakdown, where you go into a shock. Like, we don't want to be that. We want to be resilient. We want to have the capacity to deal with our exposures. We live in a very abnormal planet. Society. There's a wonderful quote from Krishnamurti that says, "It is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society." And that's what we're seeing right now. There's a confirmation where in our society today, being unhealthy is normalized. And so being adjusted to that, to a profoundly sick society, that is not something that we need to strive for. In fact, today, if you're healthy, you're weird. You're not normal. And so right now we need to strive to be a little bit more weird. I'm advocating for folks to be different, to be abnormal, until we can shift the culture to making health normalized again. And I know that that's going to happen, because in our society today, where we're seeing the highest rates of epidemic levels of disease, every chronic disease you can name, infectious disease, the list goes on and on. There can't be a problem without a solution. And so even as this is happening with our kind of demented view of human health, and we've been dissecting ourselves, and we've gotten to a place where we are at war against our own cells, against what makes up our tissues, against the microbes that inhabit our bodies. As we've done that, and we've looked through the lens of conventional medicine and our treatments, quote, treatments for illness, poisoning, cutting, and radioactive treatments, radiation burning, being the tool belt. None of those things speak to health. In spot cases, of course, these things can be viable. But right now we're shifting to, with that being said, and this is the point I want to make, is going to a conventional university, we're force-fed these beliefs that it is in our best interest to treat these symptoms. When a patient manifests symptoms, you do something to treat the symptoms. We don't talk about what caused the symptom. We don't talk about root causes. When somebody has hypertension, it's not a sign that they're deficient in lisinopril, that's the paradigm that we're operating from. But with that, this knowledge and in recent decades of healthcare, of medicine, of training physicians has really been kind of reserved for a certain guild and a certain way of thinking. While that has taken place, and while everything has gotten worse with our society's health, and we have a $4 trillion healthcare system now here in the United States, we've seen the emergence of platforms like this at the same time. Right now, this is emerging where folks can get educated about their own bodies. They can be empowered. They can learn from the very best people in the world in their respective fields of healthcare, of medicine, and you and I know many of these folks, and we've never seen a time like this. So again, while things might look bleak on the surface, I know there's a tipping point, there's a shift that's taking place. And we just seen a real kind of like, all of this has been thrown into a Vitamix the last couple of years and really blended up to really see the mess that we've gotten ourselves into. And so, I really see it as a great opportunity. Of course, it's been frustrating. Of course, it's been hard to witness for many people. The suffering, the separation, the sudden dichotomy that's taken place where you're either black or white, you're in or out, you're this or that. And the politicization of science, all of these things were already happening, but now it's really been brought to the surface for us to be reminded that we don't want to be adjusted to a severely sick society. We want to adhere to the principles of life. That's what science really is supposed to be at its core, is the study and understanding of life, of nature, of how things work. And within that, there's this underlying tenet in science in its truest sense is to continue to question what you think you know. So, that's really what the mission is. And I know that you share that. And it's so remarkable that we're a part of this. And everybody listening is a part of this, is a part of this movement. Because there is the reality that, we have, we're knocking on the door of about 250 million Americans are either overweight or obese. We have approximately somewhere in the ballpark, even right now, things that were rare, like autoimmune conditions. We have upwards of about 50 million Americans have autoimmune diseases. We're just seeing everything get progressively worse. That does exist, but also at the same time, we have groups of humans who are striving to be healthier and happier and more successful than we've ever seen humanity be. And you can punch your ticket. The great news is that you get to punch your ticket which train you're going to get on.
If you enjoyed that clip, press here for the full episode. I'll see you over there.
If you implement fasting mimicking nutrients like what we're talking about here, and I'm just mentioning a couple, like with MCTs, you're going to possibly up-level the benefits of that fast. They're used to literally make